Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 5, Section 4, and this will be the last section on this series, and we'll be talking about HTML5 and mobile phones, or mobile apps. For this section, I'm not going to do a customized project like we've been doing, only because it would be, I'm not going to develop a mobile app. It would just be beyond the scope of this series and just would take up way too much time. So we're just going to talk about what's going on with HTML and mobile apps. So there's a lot of controversy between developers about what's better for mobile apps, HTML5 or just the native apps that you'd find on the App Store. And I agree with most of the HTML5 positive aspects, but I personally wouldn't say that it would replace the App Store or anything like that. But there are a lot of advantages to HTML5 over native apps, and one of the biggest being that an HTML5 app can be downloaded from a website. You don't have to go through the App Store or the Play Store or anything like that. It's just much easier. You don't have to update it. A lot of the native apps, they'll update themselves, and it's just more freedom, especially for developers when developing the app. And another thing that's great about HTML5 apps is it's much cheaper to develop an HTML mobile app than it is to develop a native app. Facebook spent over $1 million on a simple photo sharing app. It's very expensive, and there's multiple reasons for that. One of the reasons is that for the developer to develop a native app, say an iOS and iPhone app, would need to know Objective-C programming, and for Android they need to know Java, and Windows Phone is I think it's C#. So those developers cost a lot more than an HTML JavaScript web developer. And another reason is that the cost of the actual software to develop the native apps is extremely expensive, and HTML5 you could just use open source IDEs, and it's just much cheaper, and just from a software point of view. And there's a third app that we should talk about, and that's hybrid apps. And what a hybrid app basically is it's an HTML5 JavaScript app, but it's wrapped in a native app container or wrapper. There's different names for it, and Facebook has a lot of hybrid apps, and there's solutions like PhoneGap, which offers this environment for you to build your app in, and this way you don't have to have the developer that codes Objective-C or C# or Java. You can have an HTML developer create basically what looks like a native app that you could put in the App Store. As far as mobile browser support for HTML5, it's really getting there. This table is from mobilehtml5.org, and it shows which different APIs are available for which mobile browser. Mobile browsing is a little more complicated than desktop browsing because there's different versions of different browsers on different phones, on different platforms. So, but we're really getting there in terms of HTML5. If you look at this chart, it shows you the support for each version of each browser, and you'll see things that we've talked about in this series: application cache, web storage, geolocation, and you can see which versions of which browser support these APIs. And then we have another chart which is just added features. We have the Canvas API, SVG, all stuff that we've talked about during this series, and it shows which browser on which phone supports what. Alright, so next we have frameworks. Most web developers, and especially mobile developers, use some type of framework, whether it's their own or whether it's a popular open source framework like the ones I've listed here. And it just makes things move quickly and smoothly rather than starting from scratch. In my experience, it's been very rare for someone to develop a mobile app without some kind of framework. And here I featured some that I've had run-ins with and experiences with that I've liked, some more than others, but I've listed here some that I've used that I really liked. Now, titanium I've used, and it's a little different than the other three. Doesn't deal with so much with HTML5 itself, but it takes JavaScript code and it analyzes and pre-processes it, and then pre-compiles it into a set of symbols that are resolved based on your application uses of the Titanium API. It's a little complicated. It's a little more complicated than the other three, but I have used it, and it is preferable for if you're building hybrid type framework, hybrid type apps with both HTML5 and native wrapper. And the next one we have is Sanka Touch, and this particular app, it's a mobile app it's an HTML5 mobile app framework that allows you to develop web apps that look and feel native on iPhones and Android devices, and it supports HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. It has over 50 built-in components to it, and it has a built-in MVC, Model View Controller system, that's really cool to work with. And Sanka Touch is free. It's open source and it's free. You can pay for support if you want, depending on the number of developers that'll be working with it. But yeah, it's a great product, great framework to work with. And next we have Sprout Core Touch. And Sprout Core Touch is the Touch edition of the Sprout Core framework that's used to develop HTML5 web applications. That includes complete support for touch events and hardware acceleration on the iPad and on the iPhone. And PhoneGap is probably the one I would recommend. That's a framework I'd recommend to beginners if you're just getting into this stuff, into any kind of HTML5 mobile development. Because what it does is it utilizes HTML5 standards so you can write mobile applications, and it also provides a JavaScript SDK so you can access native device capabilities. So this is a pure hybrid type framework, and it's different than, like, say, Titanium, because PhoneGap is a web-based solutions, where Titanium is a pure JavaScript API that creates native code. So at the core, they serve different functions for different organizations. Now, when you build an HTML5 mobile application, you're going to most likely take advantage of the application cache or the app cache feature of HTML5. Now, you'll need this because you want to have an icon, you want to have a startup screen, and you want the user to be able to use the app without having to be connected to the internet. And to be able to use the cache in this way, you need a server where you can change the HTTP headers on your files. And you can do this by utilizing the htaccess file on any Apache server. Now, like I said earlier, I'm not going to go deep into the code because there's just so many different things to explain and to do, and it would just be it wouldn't go along with the scope of this series. But this would be an example of just the basic HTML5 layout of a hybrid HTML5 Apple iPhone app. Alright, so this would just be basically a shell. There's no JavaScript here. I'm not going to go into the JavaScript or any kind of database stuff or deep application stuff. This is just the shell and basically just the head of the HTML5 document. So we have our basic HTML head body tags. The first thing that we have here is the viewport, and we want to set user scalable to no, because even though this isn't a native app, we want it to appear as a native app. So we want to scale it as if it was not in a browser, but as if it was a regular native app from the App Store. So you can set different scales and width, device widths and defaults, and stuff like that. The next thing we have this Apple Mobile Web Capable, Web App Capable. It's just a tip-off that tells the iPhone that this will be an offline app. This will be an Apple capable offline app. And the next thing we have is this Apple Mobile Web Status Bar Style, and this hides the status bar and the navigation bar when the app is offline. So it doesn't look like it's just a web app, but as if it was a native app. And the Apple Touch icon, this is the pointer to the image that we want to be the icon, which I'm going to explain next. And then we have the Apple Touch startup image, which will be kind of like it's a URL pointing to the startup image, which would be like the splash screen or like this startup screen. And then we just link our CSS files. We want to add these media, screen, mobile, and we want it to be able to detect what browser, or if it's a mobile device, and if so, is it an app, is it an iPhone. And then we just have the title, regular title, and then we have the body, and in the body we would have all our JavaScript APIs and all that good stuff. That's kind of beyond this slide, this code. But this is an HTML5 tutorial, so I'm not going to go into that, into specific JavaScript and so forth. So next we have icons and start screens, and when you develop any kind of hybrid or native app, you need to have certain icons and start screen, and they need to be a certain size. For this, the iPhone and Android are a little different. The iPhone icons should be 57 by 57 pixels, and these would be the icons you'd see like in the App Store and on the actual device. And then the splash screen or startup screen should be, for the iPhone, should be 320 by 460, and it should be in PNG or JPEG format. And that brings us to the end of the chapter, section, and the end of the series. So you now know HTML5. We've went over everything from basic HTML, standard HTML4 tags and elements and attributes and all that good stuff, and we learned CSS, and we've learned HTML5 tags and all the new features, geolocation, application cache, all the great new features of HTML5. And we've also dabbed into CSS3 and the new selectors and so forth, and also JavaScript. I'm sure you learned quite a bit of JavaScript. So this is the end, and I thank you for watching.